Let's talk all things arts on Julie Whitney Scott Presents, heard only on WGRN 91.9 LP, the Green Renaissance Station. Welcome to Let's Talk All Things Art. And we are going to be talking with a special guest today. Her name is Miss Evonne Fields-Gould. And not only is she a playwright, but she's a quilt maker. And I am so excited to talk to her about her artistic, creative work that she does and that she's put out into this community. Thank you, Miss Evonne, for being with me today on Let's Talk All Things Art. And I'm really excited to speak with you about your quilting. But before we get to that, why don't you just tell everybody a little bit about you and what it is that you do as an artist?
Well, I started writing screenplays with my son Peter, and that went on for several years. And then I branched off, and Peter said, "Why don't you start doing playwriting?" And that was because he got to the point where he wasn't able to continue with making independent movies. So I said, "Oh, I can't do that." And he said, "Oh, yes, you can." So I was at college at the time, and which was several years ago. And I studied a lot about writing because I took up English and history, and I felt the two work together. And so I said, okay, I'll try it. And I started doing that. And the quilt making came about, several years ago also. And I always wanted to make quilts. I always loved quilts, and I admired other people who made quilts. And when my sons were very young, I made a patchwork quilt, and it was just blocks. It was very simple. And I never made one since that time, and maybe like 20, 30 something years later. So then I started really getting serious about the quilts and studying it on YouTube, and picked that up and started making quilts. And I cannot keep count of how many I've made so far, because I gave a lot of them away, and I started keeping them because I wanted my children to have them, as my legacy when I'm gone. So and hopefully they will keep those. But yeah, basically that's pretty much my life, and raising kids, 3 children. And so,
You said that you were writing screenplays. Talk to us about that. Was that something that you always wanted to do, or did you just do it to help out your son? And which one do you prefer, screenwriting versus playwriting, or is there a difference in that for you as a writer?
uh well, I started writing the screenplays to help Peter out, my son Peter. And um, as far as the difference between, I found out that they're basically the same, playwriting and screenwriting. Um, so it's still, it's, to me, it's the same. You still have certain elements you have to have in each one. And basically, to me, they're almost the same thing, the same elements you have to have in there.
What's one of your favorite plays that you wrote? You had one that was submitted and accepted to the Columbus Black Theater Festival. Talk to us about submitting plays, and because a lot of people are scared. I'm a playwright, and it's not that I'm scared. It's just that I personally don't have time. It seems to be a hard work to find places that set plays, or that would fit your genre in your writing. Did you find any difficulty in that?
Yes, yes, all the time. And usually I don't do the submitting. Peter usually does that for me because I get totally confused. Yeah, at my age, I'm like, I can't deal with this. I can't deal with it. And Peter comes and, Mom, which one do you think I should submit? Or here's a play festival that I think might fit your play. And I said, okay, go and submit that one. Or I said, no, I don't think it's going to fit. Don't worry about it. But I'm the type of person, I just enjoy the writing. And if it gets submitted somewhere, it does. If it doesn't, I don't worry about it. It's just something I just enjoy writing and telling stories through the, playwriting. And so
How much of yourself do you put into your writing?
I put, oh wow, I say maybe some plays maybe like 50%, a little more, some a little less. The one that played at your festival, that had a lot of my life in it, what I had gone through being a person dealing with dyslexia, and how it affected my, my marriage, my life, and people around me, and because I'm very introverted, and because of all of that, I feel, it's, people judge you when you say, I have this, I have that, or I'm suffering with this or that. You end up being labeled. And I think you should not label people. You accept them as they are and understand the difficulties that they're dealing with. It shouldn't be something that you feel like you have a disease that they may catch or something, it makes you feel that way. And dyslexia, I think, gives people a sense, for me, that, oh, you're not intelligent enough, and I think that's wrong, because just because you may stumble with reading, or it could be math, doesn't mean you're not intelligent, because that area that you're weak in, you're strong in another area, and you still can function and deal and function in the world and be a productive person and have value.
Mhm. The play you're talking about is Where Winter Rests on a Wounded Heart. And I directed that particular piece. And the reason I really like that piece, which it was, the plays for the Black Theater Festival are selected blindly. I have a group of readers, that read it, and then they get together and then they whittle it down, and they picked. And that play was picked because it really met the theme of speaking truth that heals. One of the things that you said about how people sometimes put that with the lack of intelligence, I think that that's kind of changed a little bit now. I know that 50, 40, 20, even 30, even 20 years ago, maybe that it was a stigma. And a lot of children are overlooked in school that are young, and like you said, because it hasn't been diagnosed and they haven't figured it out. Like, oh, it's just a matter of they switching their words. It's just a matter of teaching them how to look at it this way, or fixing that problem, because a lot of times it's not diagnosed, and people don't pick it up. That's all it is a matter of reading, and not so much intelligence, which we find in a lot of things in life, that sometimes if a person learns how to adapt or change a situation, they can actually do the task. Quilting. What's your favorite quilt that you've made, and the significance of that quilt?
I think it's the slave quilt that I made, and to me, it's a teaching tool, and I love being able to teach things for people to learn from. Shows. I think I said that right, but it's, I don't know. It has really a deep meaning. And it's hard for me to explain exactly what that meaning is, but I think it's learning of who you are, where you came from, and to know where you came from, where you're going to go. You have a good sense of your future and how you're going to lead your life, that path you're going to go down. And along with that quilt, I was working on a stage play with that sort of went with it, and it's called Girl Lost. Now she had to find who she is. She had to find her identity. And so as I was making that, I was thinking about how I was going to write this story, and where it's going to go, and her journey, and the journey of the quilt that I was making, where the blocks are going to go, and what the artwork on it was representing, and the fleeing of the slave, and each block had a symbol of as a sign of where you go, what house do you go to, your safe house, where you're going to go to find your food, the path that you're going to take. It represents that. And it's time to pack up and leave, to get ready to go, because, to leave the plantation, to go, find your freedom, and that boat that sails off and takes you either to Canada or wherever you're going to go. So I wish I had it out, to show you the blocks and what they mean. So it had a lot of meaning. And it took me a long time really to even find my own identity and understand my own heritage. And because I used to feel ashamed of being a Black person, years ago, it was just like, we did not have that representation that we have now, movies, because I used to watch a lot of TV, and we were, the servant, or the comic relief character back in the 50s. And it didn't make me feel like I was a human being, I was worth anything. So it took me a while to find myself. And, with the upcoming discovery of Black people and, doing the 70s, 60s and 70s, I went like, oh, okay. And then studying more about our Black history, it really made me feel good about myself. So I think that quilt and that play has a lot of meaning for me. So
Quilting is such a beautiful art form that has been around for centuries, that tells stories about the people who have it, because who made them, basically, or unless they're making it, to represent something. Like you were making this quilt, and then it just kind of evolved into, oh, this is this story. And so they kind of weave together. And that's, I think, is, I'm not a quilt maker or anything, but I looked it up a little bit and found that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you are the quilt maker, but it's about putting pieces together from materials and things that you wore or other people had or wore, to put that together to sort of tell that story of that particular family. And I'm assuming that's probably why it's important to you, that it's your legacy, there are some that you like, these are legacy that you hope that they will keep and pass down, because some people right now still have quilts that have been passed down for generations. So what do you love the most, writing or quilting?
oh, I can't, they're both the same. I found them on the same level. If I can't think of a story and something I want to write, then I'll go a quilt, and that gives me a chance to think, that my mind work on my next play that I want to write. And then once I finished a quilt or quilts, and then I'll work on my writing. I try to set a time limit for myself. We'll work on a quilt for a certain amount of time, then I'm going to write for a certain amount of time sometimes. And a lot of times by quilting, when I get very stressed or anxious or depressed, whatever, I feel I need to work on a quilt, because that helps. And I started off hand quilting my quilts, just the quilting work, not putting it together. I usually do all that on a sewing machine, but the quilting and the patterns I'm going to make, I used to do by hand. Then I found out, excuse me, how to machine quilt on machine. But now I want to go back to hand quilting, because it's more relaxing. And I can sit back and just hand quilt, and then let my mind think on whatever, another play, or what, how my day has gone, or what I need to work on myself personally. And so, yeah, I'm going back to the hand quilting now. Yeah.
Are you working on anything special right now for in your playwright?
I'm trying to think of a story for the end of play, excuse me, end of play for the Dramatist Guild. In the month of April, they asked playwrights to join into this end of play program, where starting on day 1 of April to the end of April, the last day of April, you work on a play each day. And that's what I'm trying to get my quilting in a certain area where I can stop and work on the end of play for a new play that I want to write. So
Yeah, I've seen those before, and it's like it's a challenge. And for me, it's something I want to do, but I know I can't do until I really have time to do that.
Mhm.
Because something you said earlier about you make time to quilt, you make time to write. And I am just very, I'm in awe of people that can actually make that time for that writing. Because as a writer, for me, I'm not like that. You know what I'm saying? It's just something to come to me and I'll just start writing it. And I may not finish it. You know, I'll start something. I can't tell you how many things I got to start it because I truly believe in, because I've lost so many good thoughts that I had by not writing them down. So I'm one of those people that believe in, okay, write it down, what you're thinking now, and you can always go back to it versus just losing it. You know, because I've lost things before, you know, where I didn't write it down. And it was like, oh, because Miss Evonne, the older we get, the more we forget. So if we don't, at least for me, if I don't write it down or it's not in my calendar or something, it's probably going to be missed. So I really admire Miss Evonne, that you're able to, just be that disciplined, to, this is what I'm gonna do. So you'll probably do very well with that challenge, because you're disciplined enough that you will make that time to write. This has been a really interesting conversation with you. I appreciate you being with me today. What kind of words of encouragement would you have? I always like to end my sessions with asking people, what kind of word of encouragement do you have for my listeners out there based on something that we've discussed today?
Well, what's always been in my mind, which I would love to get out there to our young people, is don't give up on yourself and just keep going and just ignore that outside noise. Listen to your inner voice and be true to yourself. Go out there. Don't feel that just because of this, I can't do that. Just because of that, I can't do this. You can do whatever you want to do. Set your mind to do it. And I have proven that with myself with the quilting, because I didn't know I have always sewn, but as far as doing a quilt, I didn't know if I could ever do that. And as far as playwriting, writing a play, because I always loved to tell stories. When I was a kid in grade school, I would stay up at night watch movies because I loved the storytelling. And because of the fact that I couldn't read well or spell well, I felt I could never write. But I'm doing, with the encouragement of Peter, I can do those, I can write now, I can write telling stories. It's a little difficult. I have to have someone check my work, and I'm making quilts. They're not perfect, and they're not supposed to be perfect. And you also have to prove that failure is good, because you're learning from those failures. And you just keep trying and working, and just don't let anything stop you. Don't listen to the outside noise of not being a decent human being. You don't have to go out there and rob. You don't have to go out there and always settle for drugs just because your buddy is doing it. Don't let that peer pressure into something that can turn you into a person or someone you don't want to be. Just keep striving. Just keep striving for the best. Set your goal and work towards it. We might not always get there, but we can feel good the fact that we tried and we did our best. I think that's all. It might be a little more, but I can't think of it right now.
Well, those are really good words of encouragement. So I'm taking them in, and I'm sure that my listeners are going to take them in too. So I want to thank you once again, Miss Evelyn, for being with me today on Let's Talk All Things Art. Have a good day.
Thank you so much. You have a good day.